cat, Luke. One of our cats.
Yes, I'm in costume.
Okay. Today we're gonna finish up learning about the cultural geography and today India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and tomorrow we're gonna finish by looking at a few of the other countries in South Asia, like Sri Lanka and Nepal and Bhutan. So we're gonna wrap up with this region tomorrow, and then Monday we'll start on only part of the world, okay? Which I haven't decided yet. Going back and forth between a few different regions, but we'll start that on Monday. Okay, we're going to start with the news, and then we're mostly just going to cover a few important current events stories from India and Pakistan today. And then I'm going to give you guys some time at the end of class to work on an assignment so that hopefully you don't have any homework or anything like that this afternoon. So it'll be a pretty relaxed day today. No note taking.
He would have been yellow if we didn't put him in the gray tub.
In the day's other news, dozens of wildfires kept burning across the Pacific Northwest in California. President Trump declared a federal disaster in Oregon, where several small towns have been razed. But improved weather is helping. In California today, crews stopped a fire just 500 feet from the famed Mount Wilson Observatory. Federal health agencies and the Pentagon outlined plans today to make COVID-19 vaccines available for free to all Americans. The campaign would begin gradually late this year or early next year. At a U.S. Senate hearing, the head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention cautioned that the supply will be very limited at first.
If you're asking me when is it going to be generally available to the American public, so we can begin to take advantage of vaccine to get back to our regular life, I think we're probably looking at late second quarter, third quarter, 2021.
Later, President Trump said that Director Redfield made a mistake in his estimate. Redfield also defended his agency's scientific integrity, and he dismissed claims that CDC scientists are plotting against President Trump's re-election. That charge came from Trump appointee Michael Caputo of the Health and Human Services Department. Today, the department announced that Caputo is taking a 2-month leave of absence. The Big Ten Conference has reversed field and will play college football after all this year with pandemic precautions. Officials today announced 8 regular season games starting next month, plus a conference title game. That would make the winner eligible for the national championship. In the presidential campaign, Democrat Joe Biden blasted President Trump's latest statements on the pandemic. In a town hall last night, the president played down the need for masks and said that he had done all that could be done. Biden spoke today in Wilmington, Delaware.
All the president had to offer last night, President Trump, was the same weak and feckless inaction. Let me be clear. I trust vaccines, I trust scientists, but I don't trust Donald Trump. At this moment, the American people can't either.
Biden also dismissed claims by the Trump campaign that he is trying to undermine public confidence in a potential vaccine for political gain. A U.S. House committee has issued a scathing report on the Boeing 737 MAX. It blames failed government oversight and Boeing's failure to fix problems for crashes that killed 346 people. It also calls for major reforms. We'll discuss all of this after the news summary. The State Department today defended the firing of Inspector General Steve Linick. He had been reviewing an $8 billion arms sale to Saudi Arabia, among other things. At a congressional hearing, department officials rejected Democrats' allegations of a cover-up. led by House Foreign Affairs Chairman Eliot Engel.
The fact that we had to drag you up here, kicking and screaming itself, makes me think that the department has been trying to hide the truth.
The IG's removal was not about retaliation on any specific report or investigation. There have been a variety of unsubstantiated allegations in the media that the Secretary recommended removal of the IG because of some awareness of these investigations. Nothing could be further from this.
Linick is one of several officials who have been dismissed from oversight roles in the Trump administration. The Parliament of Japan elected Yoshihide Suga today to be prime minister. He had long been the top aide to Shinzo Abe, who resigned as prime minister due to chronic illness. After his election, Suga promised to focus on the pandemic and economic troubles. He also called for even closer ties with the U.S. The U.S. Justice Department has charged 5 Chinese citizens with computer hacking. More than 100 companies and organizations in the U.S. and worldwide. 5 suspects remain at large. Investigators say they found no direct connection between the hackers and the Chinese government. The Federal Reserve announced today that it has no plans to raise interest rates at least through 2023 in order to boost economic growth. Chairman Jerome Powell said that the economy has recovered more quickly than expected, but he said the outlook is still uncertain.
The labor market has improved, but it's a long, long way from maximum employment, and it will be some time getting back there. I think that's the best way to think about it. In many parts of the economy, there's just a lot of disruption, and it's really hard to say precisely where we are.
Powell also urged Congress to do more. Lawmakers remain deadlocked on a new relief package.
Okay, guys, a couple of other things that we are going to talk about here. We looked at a story from, I think 2 months ago. We started this unit, but those hostilities on the border between India and China continue. There was a news story about this last night, as neither side is really standing down, and that is still sort of a flashpoint in the world right now, in a place where there's potential for violence and conflict. So let's check out this story about what's happening on the border right now and what types of communication India is having with China at the moment.
India has accused China of violating border agreements as the armies of both countries engage in a tense standoff along a disputed Himalayan border. Speaking in Parliament, Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said China had unilaterally altered the status quo along the border. He also assured members that the army was well prepared for any eventuality and contingency plans were in place to ensure India's sovereignty.
We have informed China through diplomatic and military channels that such activities are an effort to change the status quo unilaterally, and it has been made amply clear that these efforts are not acceptable to us under any conditions. This year's recent incidents of violent conduct of Chinese forces are a complete violation of all mutually agreed norms. According to the current situation, the Chinese side has mobilized its armed forces and sent ammunition on the LAC and internal areas.
China has meanwhile reiterated that a recent agreement between top officials of both sides should form the basis for the easing of tensions.
During the meeting in Moscow, the foreign ministers of China and India reached a positive consensus on jointly easing and cooling the border situation. We will continue to maintain close communication through military and diplomatic channels to resolve issues on the ground. We hope that India will earnestly implement the consensus reached by the foreign ministers of the two sides, meet halfway and make concrete efforts to ease the situation.
Ajay Shukla is a journalist and strategic affairs analyst who's been reporting on the India-China border border standoff since it began months ago. Welcome, Ajay Shukla. The foreign ministers of both sides agreed last week in Moscow that Chinese and Indian troops would, quote, disengage from their current standoff points. Is that plan already dead, given that both sides are actually reinforcing their positions as we speak?
Well, this has been the norm since the start of this crisis, to say one thing and do another. And the Chinese, from the time they entered Indian territory, which was towards the early part of May, have been firstly saying that they have not transgressed the line of control here in Chinese territory, and secondly calling for disengagement and withdrawal, but not actually doing it on the ground. Now the Indian side has had the time to build up troops as well along the border, along the line of actual control. And the same thing is happening. There is one set of rhetoric that is going on, and the other is a far more aggressive and a far more worrying deployment and counter-deployment that is going on the ground, that is bringing the troops into face with each other and setting the stage for violence. So that's a worrying proposition.
You spoke about Indian territory and the LAC, or the line of actual control. Now, Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said in Parliament that there are, quote, differing perceptions of the line of actual control, which is, of course, the line across which this standoff is taking place. The opposition Congress is saying that the phrase differing perceptions of the LAC legitimizes China's claim. Does it?
Oh, well, yes, in a way, because a government and a country has to be quite clear where its borders lie. And if the other country, the country with whom it has a disputed border, says that the border does not lie in place X but lies in place Y, then this country cannot start saying differing perceptions and so on and so forth. Each country has to be clear where its border lies. In a way, if you're rationalizing this issue of differing perceptions, you're also rationalizing aggressive action by the other side to capture the border up to where that country believes its border lies. So I think that there's a bit of sort of excuse making that is going on over here when they're talking about differing perceptions. The fact is that the Chinese have entered into a territory that lies on the Indian side of the Indian perceptions. And from India's viewpoint, there can be only one set of perceptions. So to that extent, this is a bit of an excuse-making sort of statement. It sort of seeks to justify China coming into territory that India claims that India has always held and that India has patrolled for years.
And if I'm not wrong, there are reports that some 1,000 square kilometers of territory that India claims as its own is now inaccessible to Indian troops. Is this something that the government is actually concerned about?
Yes, the government is very concerned about this. The loss of territory, especially in the South Asian context, is a very emotive subject. So this figure itself, this 1,000 square kilometers, has been arrived at by joining several points of incursion. So to that extent, it's not a really valid figure. But the fact is that China has at least 4 or 5 different points along the line of actual control ingressed into Indian claimed territory to a distance of 15 to 16 kilometers at the deepest and 2 or 3 kilometers at the shallow points. So all these things add up to the loss of a significant amount of territory, and that's a very emotive subject and something that the government is very careful in handling.
Final question to you, sir. Do you think China and India are now in this for the long haul?
Well, that's hard to say. I would say that both countries would not like to get into a winter deployment in an area where temperatures routinely go down to minus 20 and minus 30 degrees centigrade, where there's a wind chill factor, where high altitude causes very serious limitations to how much a human body can bear and do. So taking on a winter deployment, which is something that would not appeal to either the Chinese or the Indian side. So both have a very strong reason to de-escalate, and we'll have to wait and see if they do that over the next 2 months.
We'll leave it there.
So hopefully when the winter time comes and the weather starts to get worse, both sides will sort of withdraw from this disputed territory because, we've learned a little bit about the physical geography of that region. That northeastern portion, I guess, of India. That kind of confuses things a little bit. It's over the border disputes to its northeast, China, to its northwest, and Kashmir, Pakistan. So a lot of border disputes, and India right now feels like China has entered what India considers to be their territory with Chinese soldiers, and people have been killed already on both sides as a result. So hopefully some compromises can be made. That's not something that's always in East Asia and China. Hopefully we have some positive updates on things. With farmers committing suicide. It's scary, the amount of farmer suicides that are happening in that country. And it's happening because farmers in India often find themselves in terrible amounts of debt, meaning they owe people a lot of money. Because it's expensive to farm. It's expensive to rent the land that you farm, all the equipment, the seed that you need. It's become a very expensive occupation in India. And they have something there that's sort of similar to what we had in the United States for a long time, this system of sharecropping that kind of traps people in a cycle of debt that is next to impossible to get out of, because the further when you go into debt, sometimes you have to go further into debt in order to, pay for basic necessities, or in order just to keep your farm running. So we've talked about how India grows a lot of rice. So rice farmers are really struggling. India also grows a lot of cotton. Cotton farmers are really struggling. But so many of these farmers feel like they are stuck and like they will never get out of debt. And it's led to scary numbers of these farmers taking their own lives because they don't see any other way out of it. It's incredibly sad. And it's a real issue that India has right now. And they are trying to figure out a way to fix this. But it's become like a national problem and something that the country has realized, like, this requires action, because the number of farmers that are doing this, it's incredibly sad. So anyway, I want to show you this story about it, and hopefully it's something that government in India can kind of get under control, find some ways to have some debt forgiveness, give people an opportunity to escape from under the weight of incredible debt.
Manda Shastrakar still can't believe what happened to her husband almost 4 months ago. Just like today, she was working in the fields when she got the terrible news.
My nephew came to tell me that my husband had set himself on fire. My heart just stopped. I was stunned. I could barely walk. By the time I reached him, he was already dead.
Since then, she's been in mourning. Now she has to care for their 4 children by herself. She's also been left with her husband's debts. The family's cotton crops were not bringing in enough money. He'd had to borrow more and more money just to put food on the table. It's a fate that many families here share. Since the start of the year, more than 300 farmers have taken their own lives. Faced with drought and crop failure, many see no other way out. Kishore Tiwari has been campaigning for India's farmers for years. During his visits, he hears their stories. Almost everyone is in debt.
When income in agriculture has been dropped down, simultaneously, if you look at the cost of the livelihood, the cost of the education, the cost of the healthcare has been increased a lot. So vulnerability of the farmer and despair of the farmer has tremendously increased.
The Indian government has to do more to support the country's farmers, he says. Many can no longer afford seeds or fertilizer. Prices are dictated by large corporations. Politicians like Sanjay Rathod are struck by the farmers' plight. The papers are full of stories about suicides. Recently, one farmer hanged himself during a demonstration in Delhi in front of TV cameras. He too was deep in debt.
It's a big crisis. This region wasn't always like this. It was once known as a gold mine, but now we're in the midst of this disaster. We as a government will make every effort to get out of this situation, but we won't see results for another 6 months or more.
Manda Shastrikar's family finds that hard to believe. Farmers have heard promises like this before, but they say nothing ever changes.
Hopefully, the government there does see the farmers Okay, last thing that I wanted to look at here, we've talked a little bit about the third largest in India already, the Sikhs. But I just want to show you this quick news story because a lot of people in the United States don't know who the Sikhs are, what it means to be a Sikh. And a lot of people see maybe a turban and assume that they are another religion. So anyway, there's a number of as Americans.
An effort focusing on a group misidentified by 70% of Americans, the Sikhs. That's according to the Sikh American Legal Defense and Education Fund and Stanford University research. A powerful public service announcement that originally aired last year is getting a big push. Valued at $1 million of airtime throughout this month, with the goal of clearing up some of that misconception. The airtime being donated by our parent company, Comcast. Take a listen.
My name is Wise. Sometimes people ask me where I'm from. Well, I come from a dunk a basketball, treat patients, sing on American Idol, be a Boy Scout, fly a plane, raise a family, ride a Harley, and serve the community. For over 125 years, Sikhs have been part of the American culture. My name is Wise, and I'm proud to be an American.
And joining me now is the director of the Sikh American Legal Defense and Education Fund, Jasjeet Singh. Jasjeet, what a pleasure to see you. Good to see you. Thanks. This campaign started last year. Why is it so important to the Sikh American community?
Well, Jose, we're very excited about this PSA, and the main reason is because there's 700,000 Sikh Americans in this country. We've been in this country for over 125 years. We're very uniquely identified by our turban. We represent commitment to social justice, community service, and one God. Our recent research which you showed really points that Americans unfortunately don't know who we are, and even more concerningly, upwards of 20% actually have fear or apprehension of our community. And so we're really excited about this PSA because it gives us an opportunity to
Jasjit, I can so identify in so many ways with that PSA. You know, a lot of people just when they even just hearing an odd last name like Diaz-Balart say, well, what country are you from? And I'm like, I was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, right here, up from Miami. But what are some of the things about the Sikh community that we should know?
You know, this is a community that's been here for a very long time. We have a legacy of serving the country, being politically active, being civically engaged, but oftentimes that
need to learn more about it as well. Jasjit, thank you for being with me.
Brothers all away, streets they run with blood and fire.
Okay, to wrap up with today, let's see. It is. Sorry if I froze on you. Carries me in a moment lost in time. To wrap up with today, we have about 25 minutes or so left. I'm going to ask you guys to start on this assignment. Hopefully you can finish it. I want to just go over it with you real quick. Chapter 24, Section 2, with the questions that I want you to do are numbers 1 through 5, and then number 8. Here we go. Alright, so please do 1 through 5. You don't have to do these two questions, number 6 and 7, but then I want you to do number 8. Number 8 kind of wraps up everything we've talked about for the last 3 days here, so that's why I want you guys to answer that question in a paragraph, 5 to 7 sentences at least. If you go a little bit longer than that, that's fine. And that question is right in a paragraph. Summarize okay, or sit and learn in so use the technology that usually classes to do that. Picked up through our discussion during the lecture and get to do that. But I'm looking for a real paragraph. Okay, so at least 5 sentences. You can put it in chat.
My revolution carried through.
Oh, everybody's good? Let's see here. Across film notes. Alright. Okay, somebody's asking about 1 and 2. What are some of the stores mentioned in the film that are parts of That's International Industry? Yeah, put that in the chat for everybody. Are you guys able to everything is changing inside of me. David says Peaches. Yep, that's a big one. Zara is another one. Macy's, Forever 21. Basically anywhere we're buying clothes. You know? Almost any place that we buy clothes. Yeah, all of those places are I put this in the chat yesterday while we were watching it. It's just incredible. Clothing manufacturing, the second biggest polluter in industry. It's only behind oil. It's incredible. And the amount of clothing waste that we create. I'm curious, you guys can put it in the chat or somebody can unmute if you want, but did watching that make anybody think differently about their clothing and where you buy your clothing or how much clothing you have, anything like that? Did it make anybody kind of reassess that? Because it makes me think about that kind of stuff. Let me see here. Yeah, it makes me feel a little bit guilty too. Like I told you at the beginning, I'm not throwing stones because I live in that glass house myself. Yeah, it makes me feel a little bit guilty. Your person propaganda still develops psychology. Your person models yeah, somebody else put in the chat. Show that Americans take things for granted. Your person model is not a great development. Sure it was made by somebody who was educated. That is true too. I don't know what all the answers are to this. I'll say anyway, but I'm just gonna find my stuff. Houses and basically declutter their houses. Get rid of